Okay, hello guys, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be trying to recreate this AI generated art. Now, AI generated art is definitely on the rise, it's the new trend. Has me a little bit scared as a 3D artist. For now, it's a really good tool and I think especially useful for generating concepts and ideas. So I played a little bit in Midjourney where I created this really cool product render. Now I'm going to try to recreate this in 3D. So jumping straight into it right now, first of all I need to set the scene in cycles, so I need to change it to cycles, 21 by 2160 resolution, we're going 512 samples, and then later go into the color settings and change it to high contrast. You can also see the layout that I use for my work. Now I use an ultra wide monitor, so I do have more screen space, so this may not work for you, so this layout has 6 tabs. You've got the top left is for the 3D viewport for camera, middle top is for the 3D viewport, top right is the outliner, bottom right is the properties, middle bottom is for the shader editor, and bottom left is for the UV editor or image editor. First thing I did was I dragged in an iPhone 13. The reason I did this was just to get the scale. I am going to create my own smartphone for this tutorial, however I wanted to get an idea for the scale. Here I just started blocking out the general shape. I apply a subdivision and modify it to the model, and then start adding edge loops with Control R. Really, you want to keybind your edge loops. I think the default is Control R, but if it's not, you want to do that because you use them so much while 3D modeling. Here I'm just going around and adding edge loops, not completely on the corners because we want a beveled edge. I went into edit mode, I pressed 3 on the keyboard to go into the face select mode, and then selected the faces in the middle of the phone. Press Shift I to create an inset. I'm not sure if that's a default keybind, but it's my one. I then insetted the faces so that we have a little bit of a drop where the screen is going to sit. Then I'm just playing around with the edge loops. Basically, I wanted to have sort of a curved look at the back of the phone, but then a straight look at the front, of course, for the screen. Right here, I'm just applying the materials to the phone. I then added a bevel to the edge of our phone. I did that by selecting all the edges and pressing Ctrl B to bevel. Next, it was time to model the camera. Doing this, I just created a plane and then extruded faces out from there. I then used a trick that I use quite often, which is bringing in a circle, just an empty circle, and using that as reference to create a semicircle shape or any circular shape that I need to create with manual modeling. I then use booleans to cut into the model. Now, one tip with booleans, which is super important to remember, is that if your object has the normals flipped the wrong way, then the boolean will not work. This happens to me right now. It's, as you can see in a second, I'll look at the faces and swap them around. I use booleans a lot while modeling, so I've got used to using them now. They can be a bit tricky, but once you get used to them, it's a lot easier. I just find a lens reference on the internet super important to make sure that you're collecting references along the way while 3D modeling, and I just use it as a reference to create a sort of a lens here. Using Control R to add loads of edge loops. Basically, all I'm doing right now is Control R as well as Shift I. Shift I on the circular faces means that you should just inset the face. You can use S to scale it down, and then I'm going to select the edge loops. If you press Shift Alt and then 2, you can select all the edges in a loop, and from that you can then select the next edge. Go 1 into vertex mode, then 3 into face select mode, and that way you can select an entire edge loops worth of faces. Hope that makes sense. And then I just extruded them out to make this sort of effect. Essentially, that is all I'm doing in this, just insetting and extruding with E to create this sort of 3D lens. Next, we'll start to do side buttons. Now I was just going to do a power button and then 2 volume ones. It's really simple here. I just created the plane, added a subdivision, added edge loops, not right at the top though, so we can have a little bevel. And then I just created another, basically duplicated the object, scaled it up a little bit and made that the boolean. I made that cut into our phone model, so it created a hole, and then I just placed our buttons inside the hole. I did the same, pretty much the exact same thing for a USB-C slot at the bottom. The reason I'm doing this extra detail is I wanted to potentially work on this, do a product render of this custom smartphone for a different video, so I wanted to get these details in. It's not really necessary for this video, but I did it anyway. Basically, I did the same thing there, creating a boolean and then creating a boolean, cutting it in, and then adding the USB slot there. For the back, I wanted to do a fingerprint scanner sort of login thing. So for that, I created edge loops in the middle, and then press E to intrude the face inwards, and then press Shift I to create an edge loop around the outside. For the front camera, I just did a circle shape and then did the same method I did with the front camera, where I'm just pressing Shift-I to inset faces, selecting whole edge loops and extruding them outwards. Again, I use I like doing this, so I use a circle just to make sure that circular shapes are actually circular. It was now time to set up the scene. So to do this, first of all, I added an empty cube followed by a camera. I then parented the camera to the cube and then rotated it downwards, so that essentially this cube is our rig. I will do a separate video on the camera rig at another time. I think I have made a YouTube short in the past though, but it is from a YouTube tutorial, so sure, if you just type in camera rig for Blender, you'll probably find the YouTube tutorial out there. Now I'm just adding the plane. It's really simple, just extruding a plane outwards and assigning the materials the same way as we did before. Now super simple, just creating the cubes for our fruit to sit on, just using the edit mode and vertex select mode to get the correct scale, duplicating it upwards as well. I created a random material for the cubes too, which is literally just the default material, just a different color. Next step was to create the fruit. Now I wanted to create this completely by myself, but I did create I did generate one with BlendKit, just someone else's apple, just to get a reference for scale. I tried many methods to model this, I ended up going with this one, which was just to create a plane and then extrude outwards from one direction to start with, then extrude the faces outwards, flip them, and then this was probably not the best way to do this, but it worked in the end. I then just dragged the vertices to the correct places roughly. Obviously I'm not trying to copy the model exactly, I just wanted to get the general shape of an apple, so I just fixed all the vertices that are out of place. I then deleted the subdivision and made a multi-res. With this you can sculpt, so if your sculpts aren't working for some reason, it's because you're using subdivision, you want to use a multi-res instead. I did a multi-res at 3, then went to sculpt mode. Generally I'm just using the inflate setting as well as the flatten and smooth settings. Use the smooth and flatten tool just to flatten out some of the vertices I had out of place. Then I'm using the inflate tool to create the indents for the cork. I think I then go and play around with the draw tool, but end up using the draw sharp, I think, at the end, just to create a few bits of detail around the indentation that we've created there. Now, I did actually try randomly to photo scan a melon that we had in our fridge, but I am not experienced with photo scanning. It's something that I'm trying to learn, and as you can see, it wasn't really working. I need to practice more. I probably did the images not good, and I was pretty fed up, so I kind of just gave up with that. For the texture of the apple, I got one from Ambient CG. I then used my favorite method for rendering, which was using the window option in the texture coordinator. This cannot be used for animation, but it was good for now because I was only doing a still image. I then used UVs and created a quick cork, in which then I used UV editing to texture onto our cork texture that we got from Ambient CG. For our weird looking kiwi fruit, I just created a UV sphere, cut it in half, and then extruded the faces inwards on the top. Added a subdivision, shade smooth, and then applied different materials using the method we did before, as well as insetting the faces. I thought it'd be quite ironic to use AI art while I'm recreating an AI art image. However, I didn't really know how else to get a kiwi looking texture, and I thought it'd be quite fun to try it in midjourney, so I generated these images of the kiwis to get the texture. While that was doing its thing, I just positioned our sort of kiwi looking fruit in the right area, as well as adjusting the cubes a little bit so that it would fit on the platform. We then got back our AI art, which was actually really cool. This render or this image of this kiwi, so I then took it into Photoshop and then cut out the kiwi sections to use as texture. Honestly, probably not the best job. I probably could have something better, but I didn't want this to drag too long. So I just ended up going with this kiwi. Here I was just adjusting our fruit a little bit there to make it a little bit more organic. Okay, so I've just realized while editing this, I forgot to mention, to make the screen look like this, so it has this artwork on it, I did kind of shortcut a little bit. I just copied it from the AI art. I could have recreated it myself, but it's quite a complex scene. I didn't want to drag the video too much. So to do that, I just took the AI art, took it into Photoshop. I cropped out this screen, and then I took that into Blender. I dragged it into a texture file like this and plugged it into the color and the emission so that it brings off a little bit of light like a phone screen would. Then turn the roughness all the way up as well. I could then adjust using the UVs of the phone. I could adjust where the positioning of the photo is on the screen. Now it's time to make our little paint puddles. To do this, I just made a circle shape and then extruded outwards using the same method for the camera. Very important that we selected the bottom edge and scaled it inwards so the bottom of the puddle wasn't completely sharp, it had a bit of bevel to it. And then also applied the multi-resolution modifier again, and then used the inflate and the grab tool to create some organic shapes. The paint just had a generic texture on it. It was essentially the normal Blender shader, but with the color and the roughness turned down. Now it's time for my favorite bit, which is the lighting. So added in a spotlight. I then adjusted the power, the radius, and the spot size to get the look that I was looking for. If you change the radius, generally it changes the sharpness of the shadows. The spot size is self-explanatory. The bigger the spot size, the larger the, essentially makes the light bigger. I know I wanted some dynamic lighting coming from one angle rather than straight on, and I know I wanted soft shadows. So it's just about playing around with the positioning. I then added a fill light at the top. Obviously our spotlight is not enough lighting on the scene by itself. It looks a bit too contrasty, so I added a fill light at the front as well. These are turned down to quite low power as well as being area lights, so they're very soft. This isn't going to generate too much more shadow, it's just going to lighten our scene more. We then added another area light, this time completely on the right because I wanted some highlight lighting on the side of the phone, just makes it look more professional. Looking back, I wish I adjusted it a little bit because on the kiwi fruit it is creating this reflection, which I don't like too much, to be fair. Now this is a super important part of lighting. I actually generated a new collection and did the lighting again. This time I just used 3 area lights, very simple, just a tri-lighting setup where I have one above and one on the left, one on the right. I didn't actually like this more, but it's really important when doing a lighting that you try different methods because you might learn things from different methods. You don't want to just do it once. Now I actually did prefer how the cube in the middle above the apple is slightly lighter in our second version. So I went back to our original lighting and adjusted that the same. And then made some little adjustments to the phone so that it is leaning on our product, so it's leaning on our cube, and it was time to render. Post-production was quite simple really. I just applied a camera raw filter, edited the contrast and exposure, and then dragged the original AR art in and just flicked around quite a few times just to see if there was any differences. I then needed to go back into the Blender scene to just adjust the size of the apple as well as the positioning and size of the phone. And there is the finished result. Very happy with it, looks super cool and really cool to get an idea from AI and create it in 3D. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It did take a bit of time to make, so if you could drop a like if you enjoyed it and some honest feedback in the comments. Subscribe if you're into 3D or freelancing within the 3D world because I've got more videos coming soon. Hope everyone has a wonderful day and thank you again for watching.